Friends and family, I'm back. I've spent the last 8 months selflessly gathering info about this Penn State football team so that I could give it all to you. It's a noble cause that I do for all of you who just show up here in August and root on our Nittany Lions. Nothing wrong with that. Some of us are just crazy people and follow the team all year. That's me. Wow. Penn State, unless you've been living under a rock, you understand that Penn State is supremely hyped this preseason to be a contender to win it all. Phil Steele had them at as his number one team in his preseason magazine, a highly respected analyst of college football. Everybody's talking about this Penn State team. And it all started with an amazing offseason. Even before the offseason started, Drew Allard decided that he would come back for his senior season at Penn State, and that just started a domino effect. Denai Dennis Sutton decided to come back. Nick Dawkins, a stalwart on that offensive line at center, he decided to come back. But the one that shocked all of us was Nicholas Singleton and Kaytron Allen decided to come back and play their senior season for the Nittany Lions. Both of those guys would have been drafted relatively highly. They decide to come back. Now, as a fan, I thought, maybe Nick would come back, maybe Kaytron would come back. Not in my wildest dreams did I think both of them would come back. They both sit just about 1,000 yards short of the all-time rushing leader at Penn State. So we could theoretically have Nicholas Singleton, Kaytron Allen right there at 1-2 for the all-time rushing leader at Penn State. That would be special. And I think fans, we always have a tendency when we're watching these players in front of us to really not fully appreciate what we're seeing. So I ask you as a fan this season, appreciate what you have in front of you, because we'll be talking about these guys for a long time to come. They are all-time Penn Staters already, and if they have the kind of season that we think they can with a really amazing offensive line, where they're going to be, just legends at Penn State. So what a great offseason. All the players decide that are really consequential to this team decide to come back. Not only that, they added some new faces. Everybody knows what was going on with Penn State at the wide receiver position. 0 catches from a wide receiver in the Notre Dame game, the semifinal of the playoff. Something needed to change there in that room. So Penn State goes out, and they're not normally aggressive in the transfer portal. They'll get a guy here or there to plug things up. But that room needed to be transformed. And I think they did a good job of transforming it. They went out and got Kyron Hudson, who was a captain at USC. They went and got Devontae Ross from Troy, who had over 1,000 yards receiving and had an amazing game against Iowa. James Franklin talks about that game specifically, the game Troy against Iowa. Devontae Ross had something over 200 all-purpose yards. He had a punt return for a touchdown, a long pass, a reception for a touchdown. And so Franklin looked at that and said, okay, well, he can compete in the Big Ten. He can compete on our team. So brought him in. And then late in the cycle, even after spring practice, or right around the blue-white game, actually, I believe it was, they went out and got Trevor Pena from Syracuse, who was their leading receiver. So they went out and got 3 productive, highly productive guys, all with a lot of experience. I believe they're all seniors, and 2 of them were captains. Devontae Ross and Kyron Hudson were captains on their previous team. So a culture fit. So that was big in the transfer portal. They got a couple other pieces in the transfer portal. Amari Campbell, a linebacker. They lost a linebacker in Tamir Robinson to USC. So they went and got a middle linebacker from UNC in Amari Campbell to come and kind of fill the void. And that is really seen as a little bit of an upgrade just because Tamir Robinson didn't have as much experience. Amari Campbell's a starting middle linebacker for UNC last year. Beyond that, they got TJ Shanahan, an offensive lineman who will provide great, talented depth on that offensive line. And I can't wait to get to the offensive line talk in this video because it is very exciting. And so they did a good job of plugging holes like they normally do, but the big overhaul was wide receiver. So player personnel in great shape, but they weren't done. Tom Allen decides to go to Clemson and be with Dabo Swinney and be defensive coordinator for Clemson. So Penn State is left looking for a defensive coordinator. Immediately, people say, we should go get Jim Knowles. But that is such a pipe dream that no one really takes it seriously. Well, they dropped the bomb. They went and got Jim Knowles from the Ohio State Buckeyes, who were fresh off a national championship. They made him the highest paid coordinator in college football, and they brought him to Happy Valley. So after all these players decide to come back, and after they drop the biggest bag in front of Jim Knowles that's ever been dropped in front of a coordinator, I can't remember how much he's making, $4 million or something a year, $3 million, something. I don't have the numbers in front of me. You can Google it. They're sending a message, not only to fans, not only to college football, but not only to the Big Ten, but college football in general, that Penn State is serious about competing at the highest level this season. That is what has led into all this hype that we're hearing about in August. Now, August is the season of optimism. For me, you've heard me on this specific little video I do on my phone every season telling you that Penn State could compete for a national title. And that is not, that hasn't been out of the realm of possibility. They were close to it last year. And in the past 3 seasons, they've won 10 or more games, which hadn't happened since the 70s. I know they're playing a few more games nowadays. But James Franklin really has the Nittany Lions rolling, and I don't think it'll be any different this year, especially after winning the offseason this year. Let's get to the preview of this team and just talk about some things that you should look for, and we'll start at the offensive line. If Penn State wins the national title this year, or if they win the Big Ten title, or if they just have success, success is going to be defined all sorts of different ways for this team, because I think anything short of a playoff berth would be a huge disappointment for everybody. But if they have the kind of success that we all think they can, and most of us are expecting that they will, it's going to be because of the offensive line. This offensive line that Penn State has right now is likely the most talented group of linemen that they've had since 1994, when they had every single lineman drafted in the NFL, which is a rare feat. Penn State is so loaded at the offensive line. And this is kind of crazy for fans to think about, because if you think about when James Franklin first got to Happy Valley, he always talks about this any chance he gets. Every season he'll bring this up, that they had 2 or 3 scholarship linemen on the entire team. They were dealing with sanctions and things like that, so that's the reason. But they've had to build from having 2 or 3 scholarship guys to now they have something like 22, 23 scholarship guys. Phil Trautwein has done a masterful job of recruiting specific body types for the offensive line. It's very hard to get true offensive tackles in high school. It's hard to recruit them because sometimes a tackle in high school doesn't turn out to be a great tackle in college. It's hard to really see. And so tackles generally can bump down and play guard, which just provides you all sorts of depth. So Phil Trautwein has gone out and he has just recruited talented tackles over and over again each cycle, to now Penn State has probably 3 tackles on their team that could start at any team in the Big Ten, and I would argue maybe across the country. 3. It's rare that you could get 1 that you could say that about. They have not 2, they have 3. Anthony Donko, who played right tackle last year before getting injured. When he got injured, Nolan Rucci came in and played right tackle and did a masterful job in the playoff. On the other side, you have a guy who's been playing forever in Drew Shelton at left tackle. Those 3 guys, in my opinion, could start at any team in the Big Ten, and like I said, around the country. To have that kind of talent on the outside, that's where we're going to start. But then you bump inside. You can't play 3 tackles. Well, I mean, I guess you can. Andy Kotelnicki will definitely try to at times, I would imagine. But Nolan Rucci is going to be the starter at right tackle. And so Anthony Donko, he's now 100% healthy, is bumping down to right guard. So you essentially have 2 tackle talents playing right tackle at Nolan Rucci, right guard at Anthony Donko. On the other side, as I mentioned, you have Drew Shelton. And then at guard, Venga Ioane, a preseason All-American. He has an opportunity to really bump up some people's draft boards for next season. He's made every highlight reel you've seen. He's the pancake man. You've seen this last year. A highly, highly talented offensive guard. Again, I think could probably start at any team in the entire country. And then you've got Nick Dawkins. Now, I would argue that Nick Dawkins is probably not the most talented offensive lineman out of this bunch, but he might be the smartest, and he is the best leader. He's a returning captain, and he'll be a captain again this year. And he is now in his 6th year playing for Penn State, which, if you ask James Franklin, I would imagine, what position on the field will benefit the most from that kind of experience, I would imagine he would say the center, because the center needs to do so much on that offensive line and tell the rest of the guys what to do. He's working in tandem with Drew Aller, obviously, and so he plays a very vital role there on the line. And then they've got guys to back him up. TJ Shanahan, as I mentioned, came from Texas A&M. James Franklin considers him a starter. They just can't play all these guys. TJ Shanahan will sub in at guard when needed. And then you've got Cooper Cousins, who, again, Cooper Cousins could start on any team in the country. I truly believe that, except for Penn State, where we're completely loaded. Cooper Cousins will play center. He'll play guard, and he plays those positions very well. So you've got you've got depth, and you've got great talent all across the line. If Penn State's going to win this thing, they're going to be the reason. And I actually just watched, if you can look it up, CBS put something out. It's about a 30-minute feature on our offensive line, and specifically those guys I just talked about. And the camaraderie among them is incredible. I mean, the offensive line is a unit. You think of wide receivers, they're on islands. Even the quarterback and sometimes even running backs or other positions, they're their own players. The offensive line specifically is one unit that works together, and they seem to have incredible camaraderie, and as they call it, a brotherhood. So I am so excited. It's rare that you're excited to watch an offensive line, but we will get to see this offensive line shine because of the 2 running backs they're bringing back. I mean, I don't really need to say much about Katron Allen and Nicholas Singleton. I already did. They're 2 of the best running backs that have ever come through Penn State, and they just happen to be running the ball at the exact same time. So the offensive line, being as talented as they are, they're going to get to show it off. Things don't always line up this way, where you get a great offensive line and then maybe you get a good running back behind them. Imagine if Saquon Barkley was running behind this line. I'm not even going to go there because my head will explode. But this offensive line paired with those running backs is going to be special to watch, and I really do think that'll be where Andy Kotelnicki starts in terms of his offensive game planning. Michigan won the national title a couple years ago, running the football, dominating teams. They came to Happy Valley, and they didn't pass the ball for basically the entire second half against Penn State because they were able to move the ball on the ground. When you can control the clock and dominate the line of scrimmage like that, you're going to wear down almost every team you play. So that's why I would say this Penn State team has such a high floor. The ceiling remains to be seen. I think they can win a national title, but the floor is what we're looking at right now. And it's going to be hard for teams to hang with Penn State's offensive line from a defensive perspective. It's going to be hard in the trenches to hang with Penn State for a full 4 quarters. Because like I said, they also have depth. So they'll get fresh legs in there when the defense is tiring out. So very excited to see the running game and the offensive line working together. Drew Aller, what do I need to say about him? We all know what he is pretty much. He's grown each and every year that he's been at Penn State, which I find to be very promising. I don't think he's plateaued. I remember back in the Clifford days, you kind of just knew Clifford was here and this is what you were going to get. And that was a pretty high-level play. But his ceiling was not, we're talking about floor and ceiling, his ceiling was not where Drew Aller is. Now, Drew Aller spent a lot of time this offseason trying to get better at all facets of the game. That's what James Franklin is constantly asked about. Where did Drew get better this offseason? Well, all of it. He needed to focus on every bit of his game, on making changes at the line of scrimmage, on ball placement, on the mental side of the game. He lost 10 pounds. So I expect him to be a little bit more mobile. I think they're going to expect him to run the ball a little bit more. Now that Bo Prabula's gone, they're not going to sub-package as much. So we'll likely see Drew run the football a little bit more. And I'm excited to see that. I'm a little nervous about it because behind Drew is Ethan Grunkemeyer, who we saw a little bit last season when Bo left, but not much experience back there. And so that's something to keep an eye on. Drew's health. Keep him healthy. Keep him clean. Luckily, like I said, it all goes back to that offensive line. They're going to be able to protect him a lot longer than a typical offensive line might be able to. Let's move out to the wide receivers. I already talked about all those transfers, and that's pretty much where it begins and ends. Those guys are already expected to be starters, all three of them. And then beyond that, you've got Liam Clifford, who's back. And although he's not a flashy wide receiver, a good possession receiver, I think. And then you've got some young guys. I'm going to talk about Tyseer Denmark, for one. He's a sophomore this year, highly touted. He was committed to Oregon at one point in time, decommitted from Oregon, committed to Penn State. He is a Pennsylvania kid, but a lot of high hopes for him. Even last year, people were hoping that he would play. The light didn't come on that early for him. It's on now. He's expected to have a big role on this Penn State offense. Tyseer Denmark, who I believe is number 4 if you're looking for a new player out there. Number 1 is Kyron Hudson. Number 8 is Trevor Pena. And I cannot remember Devontae Ross's number. You can look it up on 85schollies.com. 85schollies.com. An amazing tool. When you're watching the game, you can punch in a number that you see. It'll tell you who that player is. That's just a little tangent. Beyond those wide receivers, all the talk coming out of spring ball was Kobe Howard, a Florida player who Penn State recruited. I think he was like a 3-star, not very highly touted. And the question has been since he got on campus is, how did the SEC teams let this kid out of Florida? Florida has a lot of talented players, but how did Penn State get this guy? He's been incredible since he stepped on campus, and it's been a while since we had a game-breaker freshman make a difference at the wide receiver position. It is a position that freshmen typically can have success at. I mean, obviously Jeremiah Smith at Ohio State proved that you can basically be an all-timer right away as as a freshman. But Kobe Howard has a lot of high hopes, and I expect we'll see a ton of Kobe Howard, especially in the first 3 games this season when he's just getting his feet wet in game action. So look for Kobe Howard, number 3 in the blue and white. I'm excited to see what he does, and I am bullish on these wide receivers. I think they'll be upgraded, and I think the fact that Penn State will be able to run the ball successfully will help those wide receivers get open a little better. Now, we ran the ball well last year. I think K-Tron was banged up in the beginning of the season, but now everybody's healthy. The O-line is another year experience, bigger, stronger, faster, more gelled, I guess. And so, again, it's going to go back to that offensive line. Tight end. How do we forget about tight end whenever Tyler Warren was basically the most productive tight end in Penn State history? I don't know if that's an actual fact, but it sure seemed like it. How do you replace a guy like that? Well, you recruit like crazy. Penn State has recruited 5-star tight ends basically going back to Mike Gesicki. I don't know if he was a 5-star, but 4-star, highly touted tight end. I mean, they have had such a run at tight end. It's unbelievable. This year is no different. Now, we saw Khalil Dinkins is kind of like, I would argue he's almost like a Tyler Warren in that Tyler Warren was always behind Brenton Strange and Theo Johnson. And then there was Tyler Warren. And finally those guys left, and Tyler Warren finally got his time to shine, and he was shining all season long. Khalil Dinkins, I'm pretty sure, James Franklin probably doesn't play favorites, but it sure seems like it because I think Khalil Dinkins is James Franklin's favorite player on the team. He talks about him constantly. He blames the media for not talking about Khalil Dinkins more often, and he just has extremely high hopes for this kid. He just said he said in a press conference recently that Khalil Dinkins will have a long NFL career. He doesn't say that very often about players. He said Khalil Dinkins will have a long NFL career. Let's see it all play out. He has been clutch when called upon, but we haven't seen him play a full season as the number one target at tight end. Now, Luke Reynolds, who we all remember from the Minnesota game, where he took that fake, it was a fake punt, snapped to him, ran down the sidelines. Penn State ends up winning the game. Luke Reynolds was the guy who was running that ball, number 85. I believe he was a 5-star recruit at the tight end position. He'll be playing right there alongside Khalil Dinkins. I don't even want to say that one will get more snaps than the other. They'll be 1 and 2 pretty much. And then you have Andrew Rappelier, who was another I've been waiting to watch Andrew Rappelier play for 3 years. He was a freshman his first year with a lot of traffic in front of him at the position. Last year, he got injured for the whole season, so he was out. This season, he's finally healthy. He's third in the pecking order as it stands right now, but Penn State has so much depth at the tight end position, and these guys can catch the ball, and they can block. So, I don't know if I don't know because I haven't done the research on it. I'd be surprised if there's a deeper tight end room in the country than Penn State. They're at least in the conversation for one of the best rooms in the country. So you talk about an offensive line that I would argue is one of the best units in the country. A running back tandem, again, the running back room, I don't know, one of them is better than everybody in the country, but the two of them combined would say probably the best room in the country. And then the tight ends, again, in the argument, I would say at least top 5 for the best room in the country. You're talking about a lot of talent on the offensive side of the ball, and we all know if Drew Aller can reach his full potential, he's right there in the conversation as well. So the offense has a ton of talent. And I want to say probably for the first time in a long time, the offense might outperform the defense. I think the offense will have some times where they have to carry the defense a little bit, only because the defense is a little young, a little experienced, and lost a lot of talent, even at one position in Abdul Carter leaving last year. So let's get over to the defensive side of the ball. I talked about Kobe Howard at wide receiver and how excited everyone was about Kobe Howard. And he came in early. He came in last winter. So he's been with the team quite a long time at this point, pretty much all offseason that I've been following all this news on the team. He's been there. But I believe in July is when Chaz Coleman came to Penn State. Well, who's Chaz Coleman? Who's this guy? Who are you talking about? I don't know who this kid is. That's right, because he only joined the team in July as a freshman. Now, back up. I follow recruiting, obviously. Chaz Coleman was in this Penn State class. He committed to Penn State last year, a little late in the cycle, kind of a late bloomer, you'd call him. He's from Ohio. Penn State saw him, and if you watched his high school film, he popped off the screen. He looked really athletic, really fast, and everybody was very excited about this guy and kind of was like, don't tell anybody, don't tell anybody. We got this guy in Ohio, of all places, and nobody's talking about him. Ohio State finally decides to pay attention to this guy, and they offer Chaz Coleman a scholarship and set up an official visit for him to come see them last year during the season at a home game. Chaz Coleman accepts. He's now set to go to Columbus on an official visit, and Penn State fans say, well, it was fun while it lasted. We had this little secret, and now that secret's, it's out there. Ohio State's going to get their guy. In the middle of that week, I believe it was a Tuesday or Wednesday, Chaz Coleman said, you know what, I'm good. I'm committed to Penn State. And he comes out and he announces that, and the freak fans like myself were going crazy about this because we knew how good this kid was and couldn't believe that Ohio State was going to let him go. Now we're back to present day. I have not heard this much hype about a freshman player. And I'm being completely honest here. The last time I can remember it was Abdul Carter, because I remember Abdul Carter got in late as well, sometime in July. And by the time camp came, everybody was talking about Abdul Carter. Abdul Carter is going to be a starter on this team by the year's end, et cetera, et cetera. The other player I can remember is Saquon Barkley. Micah Parsons, I wouldn't even put in that because everybody always expected him to be great. but just the news that's coming out of camp, and this isn't just coming from media members. This is coming from James Franklin himself. This is coming from Deion Barnes, the defensive line coach, and this is coming from other players. There's even been talk about the offensive line game plan. I mean, I just went through, again, the offensive line's really talented. They're having to game plan during scrimmages and practice against Chaz Coleman, a true freshman who showed up in July. This kid's 18 years old. To play defensive line, it's one thing. Kobe Howard over here playing wide receiver. Skill position's a little easier to pick up for true freshmen. To play on the defensive line, you have to play the pass, you have to be an effective pass rusher, and you have to play the run. It's why tight ends sometimes, even if they're highly touted, they don't play right away because they can't just catch the ball, they have to block as well. So if you have a couple different assignments at your position, it's hard for freshmen to break in, which is why it's so remarkable that Chaz Coleman is getting this kind of hype in the preseason. Chaz Coleman, this is the first time maybe you're hearing his name. I promise you it won't be the last. Number 19, he's going to play defensive end, and I'm thinking he might start the first game of the season because Zuriah Fisher is still dealing with an injury. Zuriah Fisher is the other defensive end. I believe he's a fifth year, possibly sixth year. He's just dealt with so many injuries in his career, but the talent has always been there, and we need him to stay healthy for this defense to be good. But right now, I think they're playing him slow to make sure he's 100% by the time Penn State gets into Big Ten play in late September. On the other side is Dani Dennis-Sutton. Don't need to say much about him. You know exactly what you're getting in this guy. Highly effective pass rusher, and I think he was just starting to peak at the end of last season, and I think we're going to get a great season out of him. My question at defensive end is going to be, does everybody stay healthy, and is there enough depth at defensive end? Penn State's been pretty spoiled at the defensive end position. And so going into this, before I knew about Chaz Coleman, I really thought to myself, we need some of the younger guys to step up. I wasn't thinking freshmen. I was thinking sophomores. We need some guys to pop during camp. And sometimes they do. Some guys, the light goes on, boom, all of a sudden we say, okay, we're good there. We got some depth now. But you don't know until they start playing. And so that's going to be something that I look for early. Is anybody flashing at the defensive end position that's a name that we weren't expecting? If that happens, we're going to be in really good shape. And the same goes for the defensive tackle position. Of course, we got Zane Durant. I left him off of the list of guys that decided to come back. That was my error because he is such an important piece for this Penn State defense and the team in general. He's back there at defensive tackle. And that's the question. We have Alonzo Ford that's going to be playing right beside him, but Alonzo Ford had a knee injury last season. He claims to be 100%. All reports out of camp say that he's 100% and that he's been playing with the first team. I'm very curious to see if he's 100% and how slow Penn State plays him, especially earlier in these games. Behind those guys, you have a lot of young guys. Xavier Gilliam is going to be a name that you're going to definitely get to know about. DeAndre Cook is another name that you might know about. And so the defensive line has a lot of talent. My concern with the defensive line is depth. And it might be, I would say probably defensive line might be the group as a whole that I have cautious optimism about, but I'm not over the moon about yet. There's so much talent there. We need to make sure everyone stays healthy. And we know if you play a 15-game season or whatever it was that they played last year, you need to keep those guys healthy all season long. So hopefully we see some younger guys step in and develop. At linebacker behind them, you got Tony Rojas that's back. A lot of complaints about him last year. He had a hurt shoulder that he was able to play through, but he didn't really play up to his potential. He is a superstar caliber player, but last year with a hurt shoulder that he played through, very obviously nursing a shoulder, especially as a linebacker, is really difficult. He had surgery in the offseason. He skipped spring ball, so he didn't see any action in spring ball, so he could heal up from that. And he was back 100% for fall camp. All reports are that he's back, he's 100%, and he's looking better than ever, and we'll need him alongside Dom DeLuca, who has had maybe one of the best playoff highlights last season for Penn State with that interception, the pick six against SMU. He'll be there. So much experience there at the linebacker spot. And then I mentioned Amari Campbell, who's going to come in. And, it's hard to tell you what position these guys are going to play because linebacker traditionally was a Mike, a weak side Will linebacker, and a strong side Sam linebacker. That's not really the case with Jim Knowles' defense. Penn State is switching to a base 4-2-5 defense. 4 down linemen, 2 linebackers, 5 defensive backs. That's Jim Knowles' base defense. They'll sub into a 4-3 defense. So we will still see 3 linebackers on the field from time to time, and depending on the game. But you're going to see less linebackers on the field, which is actually good because we have some youth there. So while they're getting developed, we can focus on the talent that we have that Terry Smith has developed in the defensive backfield. Everybody knows A.J. Harris from last year. We hit the transfer from Georgia, who ended up having an incredible season for Penn State. And on the other side of him is likely going to be Elliott Washington and Davian Collins. These corners are probably one of the bright spots on the entire team. Shutdown style corners. I don't think they're going to be expected to play as much man-to-man coverage this year. I think Jim Knowles will pull them back into more of a zone coverage, but they'll be able to do what they do best. I mean, Elliott Washington ran apparently a 4.2 40-yard dash in the offseason by his, he said that. I don't know if that's 100% true, but Elliott Washington said in an interview that he's the fastest guy on the team, and he ran a 4.2 40. If that's true, that kind of speed will help you at the cornerback position. Moving back to safety, you've got Zachy Wheatley, who's been there for a long time. He's been the takeaway king at practice for Penn State for years, except for this year. He lost that. Usually in camp, they'll have the takeaway king. So whoever had whoever had the most interceptions on the defense, they get the honor of being called the takeaway king. I'm pretty sure Zachy Wheatley got it in the previous season and the season before, but he got it taken away. The takeaway king got that crown taken away from him this year by the other safety, first-time starting safety, Antoine Belgrave Shorter. He is I believe he's a sophomore, and came in with a teammate in John Mitchell from Florida. Both of them were recruited by Penn State. Both teammates came to Penn State. John Mitchell left. He transferred out of Penn State and went to the transfer portal. Belgrave Shorter stayed, and even though John Mitchell was a higher touted recruit, Belgrave Shorter showed up on campus and immediately grabbed the attention of the coaches last season. We saw a little bit of him in action last year, but this year he's got the starting role. And then Zion Tracy. Now, I talked about the corners, I talked about the safeties, I talked about the linebackers. Zion Tracy is kind of all of those things wrapped into one. In Jim Knowles' defense, he's going to play safeties, he's going to play corners, he's also going to play this kind of roaming defender, and that's going to be Zion Tracy. Now, Zion Tracy, I feel like, has not gotten enough love from Nittany Nation and just the media and national media. He had an incredible playoff run last year. I think he has things that he can work on in his games and in a game in terms of tackling and things like that. But he's going to be a guy that's going to be expected to stop the run. He's going to be a guy that's expected to drop into coverage, cover wide receivers, cover tight ends, match up against running backs. So he's kind of a safety corner hybrid. I don't know what that position's actually called on the Jim Knowles defense, but that's what we can expect. Jim Knowles, speaking of him, has been kind of talked about as kind of a mad professor, I guess. James Franklin might have referred to him as, which is interesting because Kotelnicki's kind of thought of as the same way. But he's a quiet guy that is all about X's and O's. So he wants to figure out how to beat these teams that Penn State hasn't been able to beat, specifically his old team, Ohio State. One really interesting nugget that came out of a press conference with James Franklin was that he needed more multiple looks on defense when they matched up against some of these better teams. So when matching up against Ohio State, both Manny Diaz and last year Tom Allen, they played a ton of man coverage on the outside. We all know that Ohio State has some of the best receivers in the country year in and year out. So if you're going to play man coverage against Ohio State, you're going to get beat. That's just the name of the game. You're going to play man coverage, you're going to get beat. You're going to get away with it against lesser teams, but against Ohio State, they're going to beat you in the end if you're just playing man coverage. Jim Knowles comes in, and the thing that James Franklin said is that he gives this defense multiple looks throughout the game. So Ohio State can't game plan for Penn State and say, well, we're just going to get man the whole game, and we'll just draw up all these man beaters, and we'll win the game because we can outsmart them and figure out exactly where they're going to be on defense. Jim Knowles, the reason why he's so well respected is because he has a complex defense that will fool offenses into thinking there's man coverage and they'll drop into zone, or thinking there's zone coverage and they'll drop to man. Whatever it is, and Jim Knowles is respected for that. So I expect this defense to take a bit of a step in regards of scheme. They need to stay healthy. The defensive line needs to we need to see some heroes along that defensive line step up that we don't even know about yet. One other freshman on that defensive line, if I can rewind, Ivan Kamaju, I believe he's number 99. Again, check 85schollies.com. I believe he's 99. Ivan Kamaju, YVAN is the first name, and I'm not going to attempt the last name. But he's another true freshman who, before Chaz Coleman got to camp, I believe Kamaju got there early enrollee last winter, and he was talked about quite a lot. Not to the same level as Chaz Coleman, not to the same level as Kobe Howard, but he was still buzzed about as a true freshman who could make an impact on this team. So let's see how Kamaju does at defensive end in these first few games, and we probably will get a good sense of where this team's going to stand in terms of depth along the defensive line, which will be huge. But I do think if you look at just the player personnel and the experience, the offensive side of the ball is a little ahead of the defensive side of the ball. Maybe Jim Knowles' scheming and preparation and the fact that we went out and got Jim Knowles could make up for some of that inexperience and maybe some of those depth issues. We'll see. But that's a long-winded 37-minute preview, although I think previous versions of this have been longer, to say there's a lot of excitement about this team. Now, it's a bit of a interesting position to be in as a fan, because you don't want to say national title or bust, because even if you have the best team in college football, the ball can bounce a different way, and other teams got better too. I don't follow LSU or Texas or Ohio State or Oregon or any of these teams as closely as I follow Penn State. So while I can sit here and tell you how talented Penn State is just based on my knowledge of college football in general, I don't know about these 2025 teams this year well enough to have full confidence in saying Penn State is the odds-on favorite to win the national title. Now, what does a successful season look like for Penn State? To me, I think they've got to win one of these big games against Oregon at home in the whiteout or Ohio State on the road. I think they have a chance to win either of those games. I think they could win both of those games, but they need to win one of those games. And I will say the biggest pressure on this team is to beat Oregon in the whiteout. I can't stress that enough. This is the most pressure I've ever put on the team myself to win a game, because they're going to be coming off of 3 cupcake games in September, which is going to be really helpful for developing depth. But then all of a sudden you get Oregon, who, although this is a new team for Oregon, a brand new quarterback, although highly touted, new skill position guys, their defense is going to look a lot different. They had some talent go to the NFL. But they reload. Oregon is a team now that's going to reload and have a lot of talent all over the field. Will they be able to put it all together and beat Penn State on the road in a whiteout? It's a tall order to ask them, but the pressure's on Penn State. The pressure's not on Oregon. Penn State's expected to win that game, not only by fans. They expect it. The national media expects it. What does it look like if Penn State loses that game? I don't want to think about it, but I'm just saying that is probably their biggest game on paper right now of the season, because even if they make it to the Big Ten title game like they did last year, we saw they can lose and still have a favorable draw in the postseason. So I think if there's ever been a must win, I think it's Oregon. And then Ohio State, if they do beat Oregon, Ohio State just becomes a game where if you win, you're helping your cause, obviously, but the pressure isn't there as much. Now, they lose to Oregon, all of a sudden, at least they have a second chance to redeem themselves and beat the Buckeyes on the road, which will go a long way in terms of the committee viewing them in the postseason. There's also some sneaky games in there. They're going to have to play Iowa on the road, which, as we all well know, we hate to do because Iowa just has some voodoo magic in Kinnick Stadium. I assume that game will be a night game because Kinnick games usually are. And then they play Nebraska at home, which, after having just watched Nebraska in the first game of the season, I'm a little less nervous about that being a trap game or a little spoiler game. But it's hard to go undefeated in college football. I mean, even the best teams don't. The national champion last year lost 2 games in the regular season. So I don't have an expectations where they're going to win every game, but I do think that Oregon game, if I'm looking at one game, the Oregon game at home in a night whiteout is a game that they have to win if they're serious about going deep in the playoff and possibly competing for the national title. So that's where I'm at with it, and it's not a comfortable position to be in because I like to enjoy these games, but the stress is going to get to me on that one. So enjoy these first 3 games where we can all just chill out and watch the fifth stringers go in and play for the love of the game. Maybe we'll see some walk-ons get in there. That's what I enjoy because then the stress is gone and I can eat a few more chicken wings and not feel nervous in my belly. Beyond that, I don't know how to think about this team other than I think we will go 11-1 in the regular season, and I don't know which games we're going to drop. I think there's a possibility we could beat Oregon and Ohio State and drop a game somewhere. UCLA is on the road. That's not an easy thing, obviously, to go to the West Coast. A lot of teams had trouble with it last year. Could they lose on the road to Iowa? If they've already beaten Oregon and they're looking ahead to Ohio State, could be a trap game. So I don't know. I think trap games might be overrated when you're talking about a team that's this experienced. But in general, I'll just safely say, optimistically, 11-1. If they end up going 10-2, those 2 losses better not be to Ohio State and Oregon, because if they are, I think there's a chance Penn State won't make the playoff, because I think a 3-loss SEC team, if they have a marquee win, would get in over Penn State. So you got to win at least one of those games, even if you have 2 losses in the regular season. That's my opinion only. And then beyond that, win the Big Ten championship, and I think you can call this a successful season. Is it what we want? Is that the end result we want? No. But if you get to Indianapolis and you win the Big Ten, you can put that year up on the east side stands, up on the suites up there. Is that east? I don't know. Yeah, I think so. So I would consider that a success. It's not everything we want, but especially if we beat Ohio State and or Oregon, maybe even beat them twice if you win the Big Ten championship game, it's going to be hard to look at the season and say it wasn't a success. Now that there's playoffs, you want to go have a deep run into the playoffs, and so if you do anything less than win the Big Ten, you got to at least match what you did last year. You have to at least make the semifinal game, in my opinion, to consider it a successful season, even if you lose. I'm not even going to say you have to make the national title game because, again, the ball bounces all different kinds of ways, and we've seen in the past it bounces away instead of towards Penn State. So let's look for those bounces early. Maybe we have some voodoo of our own. I am so excited for this Penn State football season. Like I said in the beginning about Nick and Katron, these teams don't come around that often. These teams do not come around that often where you have this much talent accumulated. Let's hope we continue that down the road. But right now, let's enjoy this team and enjoy the fact that you got a lot of guys who would bleed for the blue and white and bleed blue and white. And so I'm proud to be a Penn Stater in 2025, just like I was in 1989. Love Penn State. We are Go State. Let's get them. Let's go.